Right, members, good afternoon and welcome to the first meeting of the joint local access forum. The first item on the agenda is the election of chairman. Can I have a nomination, please? Hello, members. Can I have a nomination for the election of chairman, please?
Chris Padley.
Is that you, Colin?
I'm lined up to second this nomination.
Right, okay. And sorry, who nominated Chris Padley, please? Can you just announce your name?
Richard Graham.
Richard Graham, thank you, Richard, and seconded by Councillor Colin Matthews.
Yeah, okay.
Are there any further nominations? Just give you a few seconds. Right, there being no further nominations, I can take it that everyone is in favour of Chris Padley being elected chairman for the ensuing year. If anyone is against, then can they please indicate in the chat column, and if necessary, we will have to carry out a formal vote by the calling of names. So I'll just give you a few seconds to indicate. Right, that seems unanimous, members. I therefore announce that Chris Padley is chairman of the Joint Local Access Forum for the ensuing year. Thank you. Over to you, Chris.
Good afternoon and welcome to the first virtual meeting of the Joint Local Access Forum. This is a formal public meeting and the audio feed of this meeting is being broadcast by the County Council's website. I would like to welcome any members of the public who are listening to this online. The second item on the agenda is election of Vice Chairman. Can I have a nomination for Vice Chairman, please? Steve, I don't know what's happening at the moment.
Hello, Sid. I think you're asking to speak. Can you speak?
Well, that works, so why doesn't that work?
Were you referring to me there? Because I've...
You got your hand up, Sid. Sorry. Are you proposing somebody?
No, I must have just caught the button by mistake. Sorry about that.
Okay. Sorry, Chairman. Back to you. We don't...
Are you saying back to me, Steve?
Yeah, we're waiting for a nomination for Vice Chairman.
Yes. Is nobody being nominated?
Not yet, no.
Steve, sorry, it's Chris Miller.
Mute.
Hello, Chris.
I think for the benefit of those that weren't on the call on Friday, you better run through the Teams rules about using speak and not using the yellow hands and lowering and raising hands.
Well, yeah, that's already been made clear to them in the virtual guidance sent to them. But members, if you wish to speak, can you indicate in the chat column rather than raising of the hand, please? I think you're all familiar with the chat column, and if you don't, once you've finished speaking, can you turn off your mic and cameras? Again, I've reiterated that in the virtual guidance that was sent to members. But over to you now, Chairman. Election of Vice Chairman, please. Can we go through that process?
I've already asked for nominations for the Vice Chairman. We're waiting for some to be made.
Chairman Nick Tomlin is typing something, whether he's nominating somebody. Chris
Yeah.
Miller, would you like to speak?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Sorry, Steve. Chairman, Sid, John and Councillor Cairns have all got virtual hands up. As I say, we need to make sure that people are using the speak request on chat, because it could be that they're trying to say something but aren't going through the right process.
Chairman, just to let you know, we've had a nomination for Sharon Hayes. And Angela Tomlin is seconding that motion.
Well, are there any other nominations? I'll give you a few moments, and if there are not any, I will move on for a vote. There aren't any. Sorry, Steve, could you remind me who has been nominated?
Yeah, Sharon Hayes, Chairman.
Sharon
She's
Hayes,
been nominated by Angela Tomlin. We just need a seconder for that. If somebody can second that motion for Sharon.
Let's mute.
Steve, I'll second that. Colin Matthews.
Colin Matthews is seconded. Thank
Yeah,
you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's been seconded, Chairman. You can take the vote, please.
If there are no other, then I'll proceed to a vote. I'll assume that everybody is in favour unless there is anyone voting against. So if you want to vote against, could you indicate, please? And indicate through the chat. Type into the chat column. I'll rely on you, Steve, to say what's coming in, if any.
Yeah. Yes, thank you, Chairman. Just to say, well, we had two seconders, but Colin Matthews got in first, Chairman, and it's Sharon Hayes as the Vice Chairman.
So, right, I'll declare that as passed then.
Yeah, that's fine,
Yeah.
Chairman.
Uh,
We're now on number 3, Chairman. Apologies for absence.
I'm just scrolling down. I don't have that on here as a. Oh.
Yeah, if you turn over the page, Chairman, it is there.
What about Councillor Lewis Strange?
Yeah, if you want to raise a matter about that, that's fine.
We haven't dealt with that yet. I wish to inform you, you probably already know, that Councillor Lewis Strange, who was a member of this forum, died earlier in the year. Not this year now, last year. That's to notify you of that. Steve, you've confused me slightly because I have a script, as it were.
Yeah, I do apologise, Chairman.
Separate from the agenda.
Yeah, no, I do apologise. I was jumping the gun a bit. If I can just ask members to confirm their presence when I read out their names. Councillor William James Aaron. I don't think he's here, Chairman. Councillor Colin Matthews. Councillor Colin Matthews, he's just spoken, so he must be here.
Sorry, I am here. I'm just fiddling with my fingers.
Thank you. Councillor James Cairns. Councillor James Cairns. Well, I know Councillor James Cairns is here, Chairman. I've seen his name come up.
He's responded in the chat.
Yeah, that's fine. Councillor John Bevan.
Present, not councillor.
Sorry, John.
Okay.
Sheila Brooks. I've seen Sheila again. I've seen Sheila, Chairman. She is around. Richard Graham.
Yes, present.
Sandra Harrison. I'll come back to her. Sharon Hayes. Well, yeah, Sharon's here. She's just been elected Vice Chairman. Peter Hinton. John Law.
Present.
Peter Mackenzie Brown. Sid Mill.
I am here, but I can't find chat on my screen.
Right, okay. It's probably at the bottom of your screen, Sid. It's probably at the bottom.
It's not though.
Or on the side somewhere, it should be. I'll continue.
Yeah.
Chris Padley is obviously here.
Yes.
David Selkeld has given his apologies. Erica Spurrier has given her apologies. John Thorns.
Here.
Thank you, John. Angie Tomlin.
I'm here too.
Nick Tomlin has given his apologies. Angie hasn't he? Is Nick here? Nick Tomlin. No, he's giving his apologies. Yeah, that's it, Chairman. Thank you. Oh, sorry, before I go, I'll just check Sandra Harrison, Peter Hinton, Peter Mackenzie Brown. I think that was it, Chairman. Thank you very much. Chairman, next section is just to announce the officers present. Chris Miller, Team Leader, Countryside Services, and Matthew Chaplin, Public Rights of Way Mapping Officer. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. I just want to finish saying something about Councillor Lewis Strange. He was a very long-serving county and district councillor. I think I knew him quite well. I think I would describe him as a countryman, both by birth and at heart, and a lover of the countryside. And I always remember him as a particularly courteous man in meetings. And he will be missed. Now, I am... Steve, is it necessary for me to say the bit that's scripted here if during the meeting a member would like to ask a question, or have we really covered that?
Well, it might be just worth reiterating, Chairman.
Yes, I'll just go through the sort of thing.
You can read that out to members.
Yeah. If during the meeting a member would like to ask a question or raise a point, they are requested to use the chat function and to just write speak as a comment. When invited to speak by the chairman, members should unmute their microphones and switch on their video. When members have finished speaking, they should mute their microphone and switch off the video. Members are requested to indicate using the chat function if they are temporarily or permanently leaving the meeting. If members lose connection during the meeting, it is recommended that they end the call using the red phone icon and rejoin via the meeting link provided. If a member does lose connection, I will pause the meeting for a period to allow that member to rejoin the meeting. If the member has not rejoined the meeting by the time the chairman recommences the meeting, the member will be treated as having left the meeting during the period of their absence. So I can now move on to item 3 on the agenda, apologies for absence replacement members.
Yes, just to reiterate again, Chairman, apologies from Nick Tomlin, Erica Spurrier and David Selkeld. Thank you, Chairman.
If any member would like to declare any interest in any item, you can indicate through the chat by typing speak. You can indicate an interest at any time during the meeting if you've forgotten something, but you can indicate it now if you wish.
Nick Tomlin has indicated a request to speak, Chairman.
Yes. Nick, can you speak?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, it's Angela Tomlin. Unfortunately, the computer comes up as my husband's. He's given his apologies. So anything that shows as Nick Tomlin is myself. It's just a quick non-pecuniary interest. I am the Rights of Way officer for the British Driving Society for Lincolnshire. I'm sure it won't be a problem, but I just thought I would note it.
I think we all have interests of that nature. So that's
In that case, it's fine.
no harm in saying it, but it's not really
It's just
necessary.
it will just be for noting, Chairman. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll move on to item 5 then, which is just to state that there is a statutory duty to have 2 meetings of the forum a year. I suggest that any additional meetings are only arranged as and when required under the present circumstances. If anybody wishes to discuss that, please, over to you. Does nobody want to say anything on that? I can move on to item 6.
Sorry, Chairman. Chris Miller wishes to speak.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. Just as a matter of note, the agenda item regarding the forward work programme doesn't appear till later on in the agenda. So it may be worthwhile deferring a decision on how many times we meet until we understand what kind of work programme we're going to be trying to squeeze into the number of meetings available to us. I don't know if that's appropriate, Steve, if you can do that.
Well, if I can say, as I understand this resolution, that fits in perfectly, because what we're in effect saying is that we will organise the meetings ad hoc rather than have fixed dates. Is that what everybody else understands? Is that any additional meetings are arranged as and when required? So if business crops up, we can call a meeting when we've got something to discuss. Is anyone? I'm not getting any replies or hearing anything.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent suggestion.
Right. Since we're meeting virtually, that is, as long as we're meeting virtually, it's much easier to do things like this. I'll move on to item 6 then.
Chairman, before we go, just
yes.
John Thomas has just indicated that he would rather have dates.
Yeah.
In the speaker. I assume you've seen that, have you?
No, I can't see anything.
In the chat column, he's basically agreeing with what you say, Chairman. 2 meetings a year, and we can always arrange extra meetings as and when required.
Yes.
Thank you, Chairman.
Steve, I'm not seeing a chat column anywhere. Should I be doing?
You should have on the top of your screen, Chairman, if it's like mine, there's like a bubble, speech bubble. If you go into there, you'll see the chat column.
The only thing I've got on my screen is a grid of 9 discs with people's initials in them.
Right. Well, I'll have to announce who's speaking then, Chairman.
Yeah.
You can't see it at your end. I'll keep you informed, Chairman. Thank you.
Yeah. Moving on to item 6, terms of membership. Members can serve for 1, 2 or 3 years on the forum. Can you please email Steve Blagg with your wish? If there's anybody who wishes to have any debate on that, please kick off.
Nobody's indicated to speak, Chairman. In the
okay. I shall move on to item 7 and call on Chris Miller, Team Leader Countryside Services, to present his report. Which hopefully you can all call that up on your screens from somewhere, wherever you've saved it.
Thank you, Chairman. I will just press on whilst people perhaps search their computers for a copy of the report that was issued. Really, it was just given that we hadn't met for a considerable number of months based on the restrictions we've been under. I just wanted to bring the joint forum up to date with the work that's been happening in Lincolnshire. With regards to the type of work that we've been able to complete and press on with, and some of the restrictions we've found a bit more difficult to progress through. I think the obvious thing to say is that clearly since the government decreed that one of the few things you could do is go out and enjoy the countryside, that's exactly what people have been going out and doing. And we found that there's been a lot more, perhaps, exploration of local networks. Sorry, Chairman, there's a lot of shuffling of notes, so could everyone make sure they're muted? Don't want me to put me off my stride. So yeah, we've been noting that there's been a lot more usage of local networks, particularly on the edges of villages. People who haven't traditionally engaged with the rights of way network have started to get out and explore, which has been really good. On one hand, it's really sort of promoted the service that the county council provides in terms of what people are valuing more now, perhaps, and the things that we have been hailing for a number of years, for the last 20 or so years, of health and well-being, of the input to sustainable transport and the like, and active travel, are now very prevalent in the national thinking. So it's really raised the profile quite nicely. It has, of course, brought with it some challenges, not least at the very start of the initial lockdown, when we found a lot of occupiers and landowners who were clearly very nervous about the situation, some of whom were shielding and the like, and where you had paths passing through gardens where people were perhaps only used to a couple of visitors every year walking a path, they suddenly found that they were besieged every day by hordes of people wandering through their garden. And obviously part of the work of myself and my officers is to make sure that we're providing the right advice to people, particularly when they're saying, well, why on earth can I not close this public right of way during this period? Explaining why that wasn't possible, there wasn't an opportunity to do so, but also the sort of things they could do. And what we were doing alongside every other authority, and it eventually became sort of guidance from DEFRA, was to allow landowners to place notices suggesting alternative routes that might not take people right past their back doors and the like. All very sensible in the circumstances. We did have a number of instances where landowners took it a step too far and were physically obstructing routes and being abusive in some cases, and that occasioned visits from my officers to put them on the right track, as it were, pardon the pun, in making sure that access was once again made available. Fortunately, we didn't have huge amounts of those sort of incidences, and some authorities have seen many more than we did, but those that we did have, we were notified of them fairly quickly, and we were able to sort things out appropriately. After a short while of the lockdown, my officers were allowed the opportunity to go out and start looking at reactive inspections, the rationale being that if the public are out walking the paths as part of their exercise, it was only right that we were able to go out and resolve any problems that they may report to us, particularly those of obstruction, and also increasing numbers of cattle-related incidences, where we have more people walking through fields of cattle who aren't necessarily used to it, and also reassurance for landowners, where they were finding more and more people who perhaps weren't au fait with the countryside code and what they should be doing and how they should be acting out in the countryside. Treating farms like petting zoos was an occasional one, straying off the path, poking around in barns and the like. So we were able to get out and about a little bit more and just start getting back to some sort of normal working as far as we were concerned. The issue we did have, and is now we are back in again during lockdown 3, is our ability to publish orders. Because of the stipulation in the regulations that requires publication in a local council office, it could be seen as prejudicial that we are publishing something that nobody can actually come and look at. We did, and most authorities took similar approach in terms of trying to find workarounds on that. So we were actually putting them up in the window of our local office in Lincoln, for a while, so people could at least come to and look through the window and see them pasted in there, a bit like a notice board, if you like, rather than coming in and actually inspecting the documents. However, at this moment in time, obviously we're not supposed to be encouraging that, so we're on a little bit of a hiatus in terms of publishing orders. That's not to say work on order making isn't progressing. We're just not pushing the button in terms of actual publishing and advertising until we're a little bit more sure of the national scenarios. It is something myself and a colleague from the Adept national group are writing to DEFRA about. In fact, we were drafting it earlier, just on the idea that perhaps they could provide better guidance for local order making authorities in the same way that the Department for Transport have done for our colleagues who publish traffic regulation orders, who have been given different opportunities and potential workarounds and guidance. Unfortunately, DEFRA have been less than forthcoming with aid and guidance to the rights of way profession. That's pretty much it, really, in terms of what we have been doing. As I say, the main thing has been the significant increase in the number of people using the countryside, and obviously that can only be a good thing, really. I mean, whilst the pandemic is obviously not good, it has occasioned a little bit of thinking about the rights of way network amongst senior management, that they can understand the benefits of the service we provide, which is actually not a bad thing as far as our work is concerned. So thank you, Chairman. Unless there are questions, that's the report for that. Thank you.
Okay, Steve Blagg, I have a problem because I can't see anything or get any feedback on the screen. So I'm in your hands to know whether or not anybody's wanting to speak.
Sorry, Chairman, I was on mute myself then. Just to say, I've asked if people can raise their hand if they can't use chat. There's Councillor James Cairns is typing something out at the moment, Chairman, so probably a question to Chris Miller.
Oh, hi, Chris. Can you hear me?
I can, Councillor Cairns, yes.
Oh, yeah. It's only I don't know if it comes under your watch, but yesterday we're down at Fitties. There's a car park there, and it was absolutely packed full of children, packed full of dogs, cars, you name it. And then two riders rode between all this commotion and onto the beach. I'm just surprised that there wasn't a disaster. I mean, is there nobody we can speak to about this regarding horses? I mean, the horses have a right to the beach. I understand that, but can somebody not tell them just to be a bit careful where they're going and going through a crowded car park full of dogs? I mean, it was only last year that a few dogs went for a rider at Cleethorpes Beach, and the rider was thrown off the horse.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Cairns. Yes, it is a little bit of a problem, and it's something that we're dealing with across the nation, I am aware of, in terms of where people are seeking to take access. Obviously, there's an element of honeypotting occurring. So places like, and I'm assuming you're referring to the Humberston Fitties,
yes,
which is actually, obviously, your colleague Matthew's patch, but I do know it, and we have similar sort of sites where they are attractive in as much as there is a car parking facility, and you have access onto something that you expect to be wide open, and you can very easily socially distance on the beach, but of course that means you have an accumulation at access points. So on our side of the border, at places like Andby Creek and at Huttoft, in the spaces between Skegness and Mablethorpe, you have these concentrations of people all trying to make that access. The actual answer is that it's probably a police matter, as opposed to something the local authority can do a lot about. I know certainly down at the Fitties, I don't think where the authority has any control over the access. We in Lincolnshire would struggle to stop people getting into the car parks at Anderby and Huttoft and Wallerbank and Moggs Eye and all those sort of places on our coastline. So we have to rely on the public to do the right thing, and that's when it starts becoming a police matter in terms of local travel and what is considered to be local. So if people have travelled from somewhere where they could have been riding their horse potentially to just ride on the beach, is that essential? And that's what the police will look at. I'm not saying whether it was right or wrong in the circumstances, but it would be something for the police to look at if there are those sort of accumulations of people in one location. Hope that helps.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Thank you.
Chairman,
Yes,
Sandra Harrison wishes to speak.
fine. Please go ahead, Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies for joining late. I was having problems with my laptop. I'm hoping my question's relevant. Are you still on item 7?
Yes.
Are you asking, will you accept comments on the 2 attachments of the notice that you're putting up regarding rights of way and coronavirus?
You're addressing them right to Chris Miller.
Well,
Certainly, yes. I mean, they are actually governmental
they are draft, are they?
on the whole. But by all means, we'll quite happily take feedback, and where improvements can be made, I can feed that back to DEFRA.
Well, I'm concerned that there's no reference to feeding of animals. And certainly in equestrian magazines, there have been comments and articles about people's horses that have actually been poisoned by what has been fed. The same with cattle, actually. So I think that's an important issue that you could perhaps add to it. And also, both the articles are obviously aimed at walkers, nothing relating to riders. So could you consider... I think
it was actually more generic. It was meant to be aimed generically at anybody accessing, whether it be riders, cyclists or otherwise. But I will have a read back through. Unfortunately, I can't get it up on my screen because I've just opened up the next item, and it's, I'm struggling with getting that open as well.
I think, Chris, there could well be a tendency for people to regard walking as the sort of null option. And if it's not specifically addressed to cyclists or walkers or riders, neither those users nor other people, there's a danger they won't realise it's addressed at them as well. So.
Sure. I do know that, because I've been party to the conversations and the telephone conference calls, that DEFRA have engaged with all forms of user, even those beyond like the traditional organisations such as the Driving Society, the Horse Society, the Ramblers, the Open Space Society, but even as far as the water sports, kayaking, British Canoe, British Mountaineering Council, they've all been on the call. So it's been very much focused across the whole breadth of access. So that I suspect that the notices are deliberately generic, but I will certainly feed that back.
Thank you. But if I just might mention, from the conversation you'd had from the gentleman that submitted his comments just now, they were about initially the clash between riders and pedestrians. Well, I feel because riding's missed out of this, I can just exactly see walkers saying to riders, you're not allowed on here, because it happens many, many times to us, has happened to me through the last 40 years. So I think that is a good reason for adding riders to it, please.
As I say, I can only take that up with our colleagues nationally. I mean, we can amend a local one, I guess, to include that. I don't think that they can stipulate that we only use one form of notice. So I'll certainly have a look at that and make any necessary amendments.
Thank you.
Does anybody else want to say anything?
Chairman, just to say that Angie Tomlin agrees with Sandra Harrison. She's written a comment. She agrees with Sandra Harrison's comments. Thank you, John.
Before we move on, I'll just say it's certainly been my personal experience that, as Chris Miller just said, this enormous increase in the usage of footpaths, which fits in very much, of course, with the government guidelines about only going out to get exercise and trying to do it from walking from your home, so people who live in villages are using local paths and so on. I have been in touch over the last year for various reasons with the Ramblers Association head office, who have several times remarked on the enormous extra work they are having to do because of the enormous increase in public interest in using footpaths and walking in the countryside. I suspect that it's one of those things where COVID has accelerated a trend that was already there as well. So having said that, I'll move on to item 8, Deregulation Act and Lost Ways, which again, I go back to Chris Miller to present his report.
Thank you, Chairman. This is just a verbal report to report that very little has obviously happened. I'm so sorry, it sounds quite negative in that regard, but there wasn't a lot to put down on paper, quite frankly. I have been in meetings with officers from DEFRA, and the best they can give us at the moment is they plan for the regulations to be implemented, and now they've said autumn 2021. However, colleagues in a different area that I work in, who used to work for DEFRA in the Rights of Way, Commons and Access Department, as it used to be known, said it seems highly unlikely given their knowledge of parliamentary procedure. So that's what DEFRA are giving us, so we're taking that as being what they are trying to work to. I am aware that the stakeholder working group, which is the multi-agency body that put forward the proposals for rights of way reform, has begun meeting again. They had one meeting just before Christmas, and I believe they're due one in a month or so's time. So hopefully that will see some forward progression. For those members of the Joint Forum that aren't aware, whilst the Deregulation Act, which has a number of rights of way reforms within it, has been passed, it hasn't been commenced and awaits the publication of the various regulations that we will have to abide by once they are made. However, they need what's called positive affirmation within both houses of Parliament. So it needs both the Lords and the Commons to vote upon those regulations, and that was a necessity because there are treasury elements to the regulations in terms of finances into local authorities, where we're able to charge different amounts than we are now. So it's been a long drawn out process. It's been a number of years now and we've been waiting for these regulations. And of course, many of you will be aware of the projects that are ongoing regarding lost ways, whereby routes that were in existence before 1949, if they're not recorded on the definitive map or not applied to be recorded on the definitive map by 2026, those rights will be extinguished. Now, I am aware that there are a number of organisations researching, not least a large project by the British Horse Society, which has Lincolnshire as one of its target authorities. And we've already received a number of equestrian-led applications in the last few months, and I expect that to snowball as we proceed towards 2026. There is a potential that date, the 2026 date, will be extended. The Secretary of State has a power to extend it within the regulations by, I think it's up to 5 years.
Chris, is that your
there's
paper?
no indication.
Chris, is that your paper?
They're not mine, Chairman, I'm afraid, no. I'm afraid
could somebody who's shuffling papers please mute themselves?
Alternatively, I can do it because I've got control, so I could just mute everybody.
I can do it.
Yeah.
There we go.
If people unwittingly unmuted themselves, both Steve and I have an ability to mute people off. Unfortunately, because I'm doing the presentation, I'm not looking in the right direction.
Yeah,
But actually, Chairman, that was the end of the report, really. There's not a lot really more to be said, given that we are in that hiatus period, still waiting for the regulations. But I'm happy to take questions.
Government departments have, an awful lot. I don't know about DEFRA, but I know that the planning inspectorate just closed down completely for about 6 months. So it's not surprising, not much progress has been made on things.
And sadly, the rights of way inspectors have all started to retire at once. So they're having to train new rights of way inspectors at planning inspectorate. So we'll be in for some interesting times ahead.
I'll move on then quickly to, we've just done the English Coastal Path, which I think is you again, Chris, isn't it?
Me again. Yeah, you'll be sick of the sound of me soon. Okay, so just to bring the group, the meeting up to date, and obviously we've got some new members that won't have had any background on this, but the report actually covers everything about the Lincolnshire stretches. Obviously, things have been strained a little bit by the pandemic situation, and the chairman has just mentioned about the planning inspectorate. Obviously, they've had to suspend their visits to the coastline to make decisions on behalf of the Secretary of State in terms of the approval of certain lengths. So that's delayed the project, but it is hopefully gathering speed again now. As you will possibly all be aware, Nick Clegg back in the day had announced that they wanted an accelerated, but government wanted an accelerated programme for it to be open by 2020. Now, for reasons that they're obvious, that's not been met, and there's still quite some way to go, and that was exacerbated by the People Over Wind Sweetman case, which I've listed in the report, which meant that certain stretches had to be almost re-reviewed before they could be published. Unfortunately, one of those sections, one of the 15 across the country, was the Sutton Bridge to Skegness section, which had already been published and had a site visit by the planning inspectorate for the two objections that were withstanding. And unfortunately, they couldn't provide that final decision until such a time as the habitats regulations were then re-undertaken. So that's left that section a little bit in hiatus for the time being, although it is due to be published soon. So if you're looking at the report, if you've got a copy of that in front of you, you'll just see there of the listed sections. Skegness to Mablethorpe is already open, that's short section of 16 miles, and the two longer sections between Sutton Bridge and Skegness and Mablethorpe to Humber Bridge, which obviously encompasses North East Lincolnshire and Matthew O'Mine's colleagues at North Lincolnshire, all the way up to the Humber Bridge. Those reports are due to be published for Mablethorpe and Humber Bridge, are due to be published soon. There is obviously a lot of habitats work to be done there regarding Donnanook and the impact it might have on the seal population, but also because obviously the south bank of the Humber is a significant habitats area. So there was a lot of work that had to be done between Natural England's colleagues, both the access and the environmental branches of that organisation. So really, yes, the report says it all. Really, there's not much more I can add to it verbally. But again, Chairman, I am more than happy to take any questions.
Okay, then over to the members to ask questions if you have any.
Chairman, just a quick one, just to let you know that John Thorns has made a comment in the chat column. I think probably Chris may be aware of this already and probably mentioned it. On page 2, to quote John, I believe it should read Mablethorpe to the Humber Bridge rather than Sutton Bridge.
Indeed it should, and that is quite clearly a typographic error on my behalf. And thank you to, and John is not the first to point it out, I just didn't have a chance to amend it before we came to the meeting. So yes, that should read, and for the purposes of the minutes, Steve, when we get to it, that should read Mablethorpe to Humber Bridge.
Chairman, just another speaker, Sid Mill.
Okay.
I was going to make the same comment, so it's already been said. Thank you. About the bit to Humber Bridge.
Wrong bridge, yeah. Is that everybody speaking then, Steve, who wants to?
Certainly in the chat column, Chairman. Oh, Sandra Harrison's got a hand up, Chairman.
Okay, Sandra.
Sorry, Chairman. I should have taken it off from my previous comments.
Oh, right. Okay, then I'll move on to item 10, and we're afraid it's Chris Miller again. Board programme for coming year.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, sorry, I'm just waiting for the document to load. I've only just closed the England Coast path down, and unfortunately the computer doesn't work as quickly as I do. It shan't be a second. But just to come back to the point I made earlier about the number of meetings, what I've tried to do is put together a list of the topics that are likely to require some discussion to enable formal advice to be provided to the authority. So in the past, both joint local access forums I was involved with, the former Mid Lincolnshire Forum and the South Lincolnshire and Rutland Forum, neither have been in the habit too much of providing formal advice. It was a rare occasion that it was required. And I think to put the forum on a more firm footing in terms of its the usefulness of the forum, I am of the personal belief, and this is just me as an officer speaking, it's up to you as the membership to act. We'll just add some strength to some of what the forum is trying to achieve, which I think can only be a good thing. Beg your pardon, Chairman, it's the narrow internet pipes are just whirring away. Here we go. Okay, so the first elements are the basic policy alterations we're probably going to have to do based on deregulation, which I mentioned earlier. So with the increase in the number of modification order applications and the onset of the cut-off date of 2026, and also the changes to the public path order processes, whereby there will be a right of apply, which there isn't currently, will require a review of our policies, because unless our resource levels alter, we will have to find ways of squeezing new work into what we already do, and how we manage those caseloads and what we consider to be the appropriate way forwards with each of those. And that will need some input from yourselves as concerned members of the public, if you like, as members of the Joint Local Access Forum. Similarly, the review of accessibility policy and guidance, which is due for an update more than anything. There's not a lot wrong with what we have now, but there are elements that I'd like to run past the forum for comment before I submit anything to our scrutiny review and ask the executive member to sign it off in terms of how we progress with our Equalities Act type guidance. And all of that is kind of encompassed in the next element, which is the preparation of the Rights and Way Improvement Plan, or ROIP. Many members who have been on the forums for a while will be aware that our ROIP 2 is now overdue. It's a couple of years overdue now, and should have been redone in 2018, I think. And that now needs republishing. Obviously, actually, probably being delayed has probably not done it any harm, because we've got the current pandemic issues that we can reflect upon, and as the chairman and I have already alluded to, the increased significant numbers on the network and the value that we ascribe to rights of way, and having a well-maintained and available network is now properly understood by many more people than perhaps it was even 12 months ago. So now seems to be the appropriate time to push that forward, alongside the fact that it would also be in combination with Local Transport Plan 5, which is in the process of being put together as we speak. LTP 5 will also include bespoke walking and cycling strategies, and I have told the officers who are dealing with those strategies from the transport side of the authority that the input of the Local Access Forum will be, consultation with is a statutory requirement for those two subjects, so they're under no illusion that they will need to bring those to you and probably present something formally for advice. And then the last sort of three are more sort of developmental areas that we're working on, is trying to work more closely with planners and developers. I know the chairman is aware that we've tried this for many years, but we're actually beginning to make some headway. We've got a bit of a grip with the planning authorities now, and we're able to perhaps have a better approach to them, which is going to be useful. We've just spoken about the England Coast Path development, so for Matthew and I, this will be trying to form a partnership with our colleagues at North Lincolnshire, amongst others, to make sure that the path develops properly and the benefits of it are met. And then the last one is the development around the rights of way and access network within the coastal country park. So those are the sort of 7 or 8 pieces of work that the county council is going to be sort of pushing forward on over the next 12 months, which is why I was asking about 2 meetings, because that might be a lot for 2 meetings, and I think they're all topics which the forum really ought to be able to consider and perhaps provide advice where necessary. So I guess now, Chairman, that I have to leave it to you and the members as to what particular elements, if not all of them, they wish to discuss going forward in that we put down as part of our forward programme. Okay, many thanks.
Okay, Steve, I'm in your hands to know if anybody is wanting to speak.
Yes, Chairman, thank you. Angie Tomlin.
Angie.
Yes, a very, very quick one on that. Obviously, it's a statutory requirement, as you say, for the walking and cycling strategies. But I note again, there's nothing anywhere along there for riders or carriage drivers. We usually seem to get missed off most things. I would be very happy, and I'm sure we've got a few others on our committee here that are riders and carriage drivers, to possibly have something added somewhere, because it is, a lot of the paths we use are multi-user paths, and we have very little off-road access as it is. So it would be fantastic if we could add it in somewhere.
Thanks, Angie. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I have raised that with the transport officers, but obviously their aim is that their work is more to do with transport rather than recreational usage. So they are looking at those elements where it's utilitarian use generally, although they have, as a departure from their previous work on local transport plans 1 to 4, recognise that recreational access is just as important to include in there. Traditionally, the Rights of Way Improvement Plan is a part of the local transport plan if it's not totally embedded within it. They only tend to be totally embedded in smaller unitary sort of city authorities generally, whereas most of the sort of like shire authorities have them as 2 bespoke different strands. The riding, equestrianism and driving, the driven horse, are picked up in the Rights of Way Improvement Plan far more than they are in the utilitarian local transport plan. The government requires there to be walking and cycling strategies, and there is an element of that which will have a relationship to equestrianism, particularly, as you say, regarding the multi-user paths and making sure things are appropriate widths, surface standards, so we're not just tarmacking bridleways, which has happened in the past and we're keen to avoid. So there will be a reflection of that within those strategies, which is why it will be good for the forum to see those. And if there are elements that are missed off, like perhaps it could be strengthened on the equestrian side, then that can be put forward as formal advice. Does that explain where we are? It's not that it's been missed off, it's just that they are particularly called walking and cycling strategies by the government.
Yes, yeah, I understand that. It's just that, as I say, there are many other strings to riding and carriage driving than just simply leisure. So, we have a lot of disabled riders and a lot of disabled drivers. And if they couldn't get out easily on their horses, and safely, I might add, on their horses and carriages, then they wouldn't get out at all, because they wouldn't be able to walk or cycle. So we're always keen to get that into the forefront of anything. But yeah, I understand what you're saying, and that's fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else wanting to speak on this?
Yes, Sharon Hayes, Chairman.
Sharon, over to you.
Hi, you've just mentioned that bridleways shouldn't be tarmacked. There's a recent one that down at North Highcombe that VHS did advise on the surface for it, and I believe that he actually tarmacked it over, which didn't go down very well with the equestrian community. So I think that's a good example of where more input or more listening to is required by the relevant authorities.
Thank you.
Absolutely right. Thank you, Sharon, for raising that one, because it was one of particular concern for myself and my officers when we said you really need to consider the surface standard, and they just went and tarmacked it anyway. And then we have had correspondence, and I've had conversations with BHS colleagues from the national basis, which was only right. And if anything, it has now driven us to be able to demonstrate poor practice and something to avoid at all costs in the future, which now our transport colleagues are much more aware of than they were before they did the work. Unfortunately, it has meant that this one route in North Hykeham has been tarmacked, but hopefully it means that we will have fewer instances of it as they now understand the arguments being made against it. Silver linings to black clouds, I'm afraid, though.
It's very bizarre that horse riding people weren't thought about when constructing a bridleway. It's just bizarre, and I think it's made us all more aware of ones around us that are likely to be wanted to be tarmacked over, and just to keep our eyes and ears to the ground to make sure that it doesn't happen.
Suffice it to say, I made enough noise that my transport colleagues won't do it without coming to talk to my team now, and that because I got escalated to quite a senior level,
right?
Because I played Merry Hell. The difficulty I had with that is they thought they'd done the right thing by talking to the local stables, but because the local stables didn't actually make a comment, they assumed it would be everything was fine, rather than checking that no answer was actually that meant that everyone was happy with it. But I just think they'd responded to it. So yes, it was a disappointing outcome, but hopefully it's just underlined the issue, which means we will be able to avoid it in the future.
Yeah. Right. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else have anything to say?
Sandra Harrison, Chairman.
Sandra.
Only to say that I very much support the fact that the omission of riding has been on the paper. And I really do agree it should be included if at all possible. Thank you.
I have something to say on my own account. Chris, you mentioned the desire for the LAF to give more formal advice. I mean, more examples of formal advice. I would say to that it might involve some changes to the local authorities themselves, and I particularly address these remarks to the members of the authorities here, that we do operate under our own specific legislation, local access forums. We're not just another body consulted. And I rather fear that in the past, when we've made comments on things, we probably get treated by committees and the offices in other departments as just another body which is throwing in its consultation, rather like to a planning application. Anybody can make a comment, but just another one in the list of comments, when we are actually appointed under a statute specifically to give advice on these matters to the local authority. And so I don't know what you think, Chris, but if there's some need for a better channel for our advice when we're asked for formal advice, to make sure it goes to the right place and is taken notice of.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, my intention would be that anything that comes in as formal advice, ought to be responded to. It'll probably end up with me, to be fair, and I will bring it back to the next meeting with the authority and Matthew, obviously, for North East Links, and we would bring it back to the next meeting to say how that advice was dealt with, but also certainly where we are taking or amending policies and the like, and it's going through in Lincolnshire through our scrutiny groups of local members, that there will be a distinct paragraph outlining what the advice of the forum was. Given that it is a statutory requirement to ask you to consult, it would seem appropriate that the response is included in the report to the scrutiny committee. Does that make some sense, Chairman?
Yes, and I'm also thinking that for us to fulfil our function properly, sometimes it's the departments which are not normally dealing with rights of way who we need to be getting through to. Going through you, dealing with the things that would normally come through you. But I'm thinking of things like planning authorities or the main roads, highways, that kind of thing. There are often things that impinge on rights of way which are not normally, which do not involve the rights of way department as such.
Certainly, that's quite correct, Chairman.
That's a total for you.
Well, this is maybe where the elected members who represent the authority on the Joint Local Access Forum, that may be where their strengths lie in talking to colleagues without the rights of way remit.
Yes, I did start by saying, particularly addressing these remarks to our elected members. Thank you. Anybody?
Sorry, Chairman. Sandra Harrison has still got her hand up. Probably an error.
No, Chairman, it's my machine that's not being very cooperative. Apologies.
And Chairman, before we go on this item, Councillor Colin Matthews has commented. I think he's supporting your views in terms of the role of elected members.
I'll just remark, I've just noticed that my computer is saying that the time is 14:13, so clearly something's gone wrong with my computer. It's frozen in some way, which may be why I'm not seeing things I should. Can I finish with item 10 then and move on to item 11? Hello? Anybody hear me?
Sorry, Chairman, it's Chris again. Yes, other than that, we need to think about having a published forward programme for the purposes of our report back to Natural England at the end of the year. But if you want to just take it as the ones that perhaps I've already raised in the paper, and maybe if North East Lincolnshire, if Matthew has any as well, that we could add into that, then between the three of us, yourself as chairman, we could perhaps construct a forward programme so that people are aware of what might get discussed at any particular forum meeting.
Yeah, I think that would be very useful, Chris.
Yeah.
Sharon Hayes wishes to speak, Chairman.
Sharon? I don't know what's happening, but I'm not hearing anything.
It's all right, Chairman, neither am I.
Right, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. Regarding the England Coast Path development, is there any further input that can be fed into that to give horse riders more access to parts of it where appropriate, or are we too far gone at this stage?
Not necessarily. I mean, you're probably aware that the Coast Path is specifically aimed at walkers and not deliberately excluded, but the government has always made the point that any access above and beyond the walker needs to be developed at a local level rather than a part of the scheme. Being frank, I've been part of the Coastal Path National Board, and I think if it had been equestrianism as well, it would never have been done. It would never have been completed. It's been hard enough to try and get it in as a walking route, given the landowners' resistance to it in certain locations. If you'd included equestrianism, it just wouldn't have happened. So I think that's one of the reasons why they've asked it to be dealt with locally. So that does still leave opportunities once the route is established, of which the Local Access Forum will be a consultee on the establishment levels, elements of it, that at some point, the forum could approach the partnership, which will include sort of Matthew's area in North East Lincolnshire and our colleagues in North Lincolnshire, to ask about where appropriate equestrian access might be developed. But it isn't part of the scheme itself at present.
Right, thank you.
Okay, is that everything on item 10?
Chairman, John Thorns is typing a message. It hasn't quite come through yet on this particular item. So whether John wishes to speak, Chairman.
John, do you wish to speak?
Oh, sorry, Chairman. I was a bit premature. I'd actually indicated item 11. I was jumping the gun a bit. And John wishes to speak on item 11. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, well, I'm going to introduce that first. Shall I move on to item 11? Is everybody happy with that? I'll take that as a yes, the silence. I brought this matter onto the agenda because one of my interests is industrial archaeology, and I received a message from a national body concerned with industrial archaeology that Highways England, which is responsible only for trunk roads, and I don't think there are many of those now in Lincolnshire, not ones managed by Highways England, but they took over responsibility for maintaining disused railway bridges, or bridges that where their roads cross disused railways from the old British railways when the railways were privatised. And they had maintained a policy of maintaining those bridges, but they've changed the policy to say that they will demolish them rather than repair them. And there's considerable concern at this, partly because of historic interest of some of them, but there's obviously an interest from our point of view in that the crossing of main roads is often a very contentious problem for non-motorised users, riders, walkers, and so on. And there is a strong feeling that wherever there is a railway, a bridge which is not being used and isn't an obstruction, obviously it's a very narrow bridge or a humpback bridge or something, that's a different matter, then it should be retained for possible future use, particularly for non-users. Now, I think it's quite likely there aren't any such bridges in Lincolnshire, but I thought it would be very useful if at least we checked, or asked the county council to check. I say the county council because I think I know North East Lincolnshire well enough to say that they're pretty sure there aren't any. There are very few disused railways in North East Lincolnshire. But also, of course, we could extend this to say wherever there are disused bridges over busy roads in Lincolnshire, no matter who has them at the moment, it might be useful to identify them and make sure that, if possible, they can be kept, because you never know when it's going to be useful to have a bridge like that to put something else under, particularly, of course, for vulnerable users. That's what I wanted to say. I don't know if the officers in particular have any thoughts on that.
Chairman, just to say before Chris Miller comes in, Sid Mill has commented that there are several railway bridges on the Grimsby-Louth route that are used as footpaths but not over main roads. And John Thorns has stated old railway tunnel under road on footpath between Horncastle and Woodall Spa, ? Bridges and tunnels. So again, I'm over to Chris Miller on this one, Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman. Okay, so I think from my perspective here is that, yes, absolutely, former railway lines are often excellent opportunities as access corridors, and we can think of many around the country, and indeed some in Lincolnshire. If you think of the Spa Trail, which is a very well used, popular bridleway now between Horncastle and Woodall Spa, they obviously have great benefits in being non-trafficked, reasonably good sight lines, being in usually fairly straight lines, and have a decent, solid sort of surface to them that can be improved upon. In terms of routes, Sid's picked up on the one that goes the Grimsby to Louth section, some sections of which are permissive rights of way, some sections are not available and have been built over and lost as opportunities, which is a great shame. Where it comes to bridges, I guess I can have a look through some mapping and have a look at the old railway lines and just work out where the bridges would have been to see what might still be in place. That's not a problem. We wouldn't obviously have any on our highways records because they carry the railway rather than the road. So it's not something that we would have down as maintainable at public expense, but we could do some research to that reasonably quickly, I would think. And in response to John's comment about the tunnel, that is something I'm aware of from my work with my colleagues in the Lincolnshire Wolds Countryside Service, and I believe that's been looked at previously, but I wouldn't know what came of that as a proposal. I would have to check with them.
Can I just clarify that? If you're talking about a tunnel, you're presumably talking about the one on the former railway from Ragley to Louth, not Horncastle to Woodhall.
It's certainly in the Louth area. It's southwest of Louth, so it would be, yes, it would make sense to be going towards Ragley, yes.
There aren't many tunnels in Lincolnshire.
No.
Those are the only two possibles.
I seem to recall, sorry, Chairman, I seem to recall that previously, when it had been proposed as a potential access route, one of the problems was it's a significant bat roost. And it would be a habitats issue.
That will be the one at I forgot the name of the village now. Between Donington and Louth, but there's another one between Donington and South.
Right. Apologies, Chairman.
Yeah. Anyway, okay, fair enough. But it was specifically about bridges which might be threatened by Highways England. But we could extend it to other bridges, and I was particularly thinking of where there are main roads, which it would be a great shame to lose bridges under them. So, okay. Any more to be said about that?
Chairman, just in the comment column, one or two comments are coming in. Councillor James Cairns is asking, are we talking of iron or stone bridges?
Any. Just any. It's much more a matter of we don't want to lose bridges which are under heavily trafficked roads, say, where it's difficult to cross, or and where the bridge would make it much easier for people to cross. It's a question of just knowing whether or not there are any locations we ought to look at. That's all.
Yeah, I was just sorry, Chair. I was just thinking that stone bridges don't require as much maintenance as iron bridges. That's my my question, basically.
Yeah, we can. We can't really say until we know what there is.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Matthews wishes to ask a question, Chairman.
Thank you. I'm not quite sure who I'm addressing my question to, but there's a lovely brick-built railway bridge at Aby, just outside Aby, and it goes from nowhere to nowhere. But it strikes me that their railway line must have been built on some sort of right-of-way or trackway, or could have been. Is there some connection between these railway bridges and the disused or unmapped footpaths that could be explored here, which might make more relevance?
I think I can answer that, because when railways were built, very detailed plans had to be prepared. Those plans still exist, and they do record public carriageways where they cross the road. They don't record bridleways and footpaths. But if you've got a bridge a rough guide is, if you've got a wide carriageway bridge, it's probably a public carriageway, but it's quite easy to look that up in the records, and they're not all recorded on the modern maps. If it's quite a narrow one, only wide enough for one vehicle to get across, it's probably a private bridge. But again, it is possible to look these things up in the old records, and they're not always in the modern records. Does that help?
It raises an interesting question. I made a presumption. This railway bridge goes over a road and carries nothing.
The same principle applies.
I beg your pardon?
Yeah, the same principle applies. If it's a public carriageway, it will have been recorded when the railway was built.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there may be some link with these lost ways.
Yes.
Some of these bridges.
Yep, old railway plans are often used as evidence in proving a lost way is a right of way.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know if Chris wants to agree with me or not.
Absolutely, Chairman. Yes, I mean you very correctly point out the railway plans and the railway acts that my team will do as part of their standard research into a definitive map modification order application. If we know that there was a railway proposed, built, or has been since closed up, we will always check what records we can see to understand whether or not the railway surveyors had included a note of any particular route and whether or not they considered it to be in the possession of the surveyor of highways. So it's something we would always sort of look at. The track beds themselves are obviously unlikely to have been at any point in time a public highway.
Yes. Okay. Is that everything? Can I move on to item 12?
Chairman, before you go, John Thorns has commented, I assume in connection with the issue raised by Councillor Matthews. He states Claythorpe Bridge that carried the railway. I don't know whether that makes sense to Colin Matthews.
Yes, that is the bridge I'm referring to. And there is a disused railway line. There's actually what looks like a very nice route from one minor road to another. But as Chris has said, if there was no right of way along there, then actually maybe there's no reason to keep the Claythorpe Bridge. Actually, we get flooding underneath it. It's a blinking nuisance.
Okay. That's a comment for Chris then.
Noted. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay.
Chairman, before we go, can I just, are we asking Chris to investigate these when he looks, when his colleagues look at the definitive map?
Well, I would, yes, my proposal was that they just check to see if there are any, well, in the first instance, if there are any bridges on highways which are maintained by Highways England. And I think there'll be very few of those in Lincolnshire now. If there are any which cross railways which are no longer there.
Highways England, Chairman, would only look after, I believe, the A46 from Newark to Lincoln. That's the only section of trunk road remaining.
That's all.
All the rest has been detrunked, and obviously that doesn't cross any railway.
But then secondly, to see if there are any on busy roads, where there's still a bridge that's either over or under a busy road, which has only a disused railway across it, so that we can just be sure we're not in danger of losing any that could be useful. That's all. Really, what I'm thinking. Okay,
Chairman. Yeah, I mean, we can have a look at that over time, I guess, in terms of just having a look at the network of former railways and seeing where the interactions are with the main carriageways.
If you're sure that there are none with Highways England, which I'm sure you're right, then the urgency of this particular problem isn't so great. I'll move on to item 12. We don't have John Law here, do we?
Yes, we do, Chairman.
Oh, we do. Sorry, John.
That's fine.
John, can you present your report?
Yes, of course, Chris. First of all,
I can't see anybody, you see.
All right. Well, first of all, Happy New Year to all of you. I believe Steve circulated the Frampton Marsh Countryside for All leaflet, and the report is basically mainly about the Countryside for All leaflets, the status of the stock levels, the funding applications, and how we'd like to increase the number of members on the Countryside for All subgroup. So if I go first of all to the stock levels, you will have seen that in 2020, prior to the pandemic, we had orders for near on 14,000 leaflets, which was the previous year, 2019. We only had orders for, still a lot, for 9,000 leaflets. So we did increase by 54% in terms of the order requirement, which was great. But of course, it did diminish our stock quite a lot. So at the moment, we have 13 leaflets that are either no stock of or very little stock, so that we won't be able to replenish the orders when they come in 2021. So what we've done is to apply for funding. Initially, we looked at the East Coast Community Fund for some of the coastal leaflets, including Frampton Marsh, Freeston Shore, and others, and two on the country park as well. Unfortunately, we didn't get funding by the East Coast Community Fund. So now that the lottery has opened up from just purely COVID applications, we're in the process of applying for funding of 22 route leaflets from the lottery. It's still in the early days. I'm still waiting for a couple of quotes, and the 22 leaflets include one new route, which I'm possibly looking at being in West Lindsey, and 21 of the existing routes. There's one route that we've got plenty of leaflets of. So that's the state so far of those leaflets, and we've the funding we're asking for is for 36,000 leaflets for 22 routes, and we hope that will give us enough route leaflets for 3 years. We will be storing some of those leaflets off site, so it doesn't clutter up Chris's store. So that's where we are on the leaflets. In terms of the Countryside for All subgroup, which part of our duties is to look at the leaflets, restock and send them out on as they're ordered. Currently, I only have myself and Richard on the subgroup at the moment. So what I would like to see is for more members of the Local Access Forum help us in our quest to make sure that we can always have enough leaflets available and send them out according to the orders. So what I would like to see is those of you who are interested in helping us do this, because bear in mind there was a team of 6 and now there's just 2. And with the team of 6, there were only 6 leaflets, I believe, and now there's, hopefully 23. It's a big job for us, and we want to share that around. So those who are interested or want to talk more about it before they say, yes, we'd like to help, could you send the information to, or contact Steve, and Steve will likewise contact me and let me know where to go from there. So that would be a great help if even 2 of you could come along and help us with this task. And it is enjoyable, apart from when it's cold and wet and snowy. So it's well worth doing, and it's certainly well worth doing. For bear in mind, what we're doing it for is people with limited mobility, so they can find areas where they can walk either on their own or with colleagues. And it's also for young families who have pushchairs, so they can see what is available for them, where it's easier to access, and so they can make a judgment on whether it's suitable for them or not. Would you kindly take that on board, Steve, as if people could come to you if there's any interest out there?
Yeah, that's fine through you, Chairman. Just to say that Councillor James Cairns, could he have a list of the leaflets you are short of? Not required today. Does that make sense, John?
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. I'll send it on. I will send it on later on this afternoon to you, Steve.
Thank you. And Angie Tomlin's going to email me, so she might be interested, John. So
that's great.
Thank you.
If there's any issues that they're not sure of, that you're not sure of at all, please come back to me, and then we'll talk about any problems that you have, any concerns you have, and if you want to keep it local, that's fine by me. The other thing, then, you will have seen the Countryside subgroup terms of reference that are on that report, but there's one thing I noticed on the document pack. Chris, I think it's both you, Chris, and Chris Miller and Chris Padley. The actual logo, I think the only place that we have the logo is on the public document pack, but we also have it on all the Countryside for All leaflets, which I think is important because it shows what the Local Access Forum is about, or part of what it is about, and it helps people to understand a bit more about our group.
I'm on the phone.
The problem, I think, is that the actual logo that's on the document pack is so big, and when you look at, I've just measured it, it's 4.2 centimeters across. If you look on the leaflet, we're looking at logos at about 1.6 centimeters diameter. So we'd struggle very much to read, even if we increase it slightly, very much to read the Local Access Forum's words, and probably also the light green colour needs to be a darker colour so that you can actually read it quite easily. So there's two things there. One is the colours of the fonts, and the other one is the size of the logo. So I don't know, Chris, that's Chris Padley, whether you'd have thoughts on that, what we could do to make sure we still have the logo on the leaflet without taking up too much space on it.
Well, from what you say, I've not got anything to look at in front of me. What you say, it sounds very, very sensible. What your concern is. I'm just a little bit worried that we're going to be bogged down with having to officially approve a change to our own logo at a formal meeting, which seemed dreadfully bureaucratic for such a simple thing, but it might be necessary.
I agree, Chris. The only thing is, if we do get funding, we're looking at hopefully early June time, the actual documents going over to the designers, maybe even late May. So we'd need to have a decision on that logo prior to sending it over to the designers. Yeah. The only other
Sorry, go on.
The only other alternative, which I don't like doing, is keeping it with the existing two logos of the South Links and the Mid Links. Obviously,
can I suggest then that there's two sides to this. One is actually designing a new logo, and the other is getting it approved.
Yes.
Can you deal with the design side?
I can put some ideas forward to. Can I ask Chris Miller if I could have help from his team in terms of actually drawing up the design?
I don't have anyone of that significant competence in artwork, I'm afraid, John. My understanding, though, and if Steve can hear me, he can perhaps correct me, but after the discussions at the last meeting, which wasn't a formal Local Access Forum meeting, admittedly, but a logo had been drawn up, which virtually mirrored the one that had been previously used by the two other joint Local Access Forums, which we've now amalgamated to this one, just changing the name around the perimeter of the edge of the circle. I dare say we could change colours if there's an issue there. They are in the corporate standards, but I dare say we can darken it if there's some, because I would suggest it's perhaps an equalities issue if green on white can't be viewed very easily, and given that's the purpose of the leaflets, then that would seem appropriate. But I'm fairly certain we've already made some amendments, which I don't think would need a particular formal resolution towards.
No.
Okay. Well, I'm quite.
I certainly don't think we need to make it a problem. I mean, if just as a matter of form, at the next meeting we have it as an agenda item to prove, even if it's approving something that's already happened, it wouldn't do any harm just to have it there and take 5 minutes doing that.
Unfortunately, Chairman, I can't open up the my agenda anymore. My computer appears to not wish to do so. But I think it's actually on there.
Yeah, Chairman, just hold the line. I'll upload it. Just bear with me.
Oh, we really are going to test the technology.
I don't. I'm going to see it, that's for sure.
Right, just on the line, Chairman.
I think Steve's going to try and share his screen, so it'll be seen by all.
Can you see that?
I can, Steve, thank you.
John.
Steve, I have no idea why, but my screen has not altered since 13 minutes past 2. And something has happened. Whether it's your end or my end, I don't know. But
John Law, can you see that? Can you see the
Yes,
logo?
I
in the
can.
right?
I can see it, yes.
Yeah. I mean, basically, I think what Chris is suggesting is that we may probably use that. Chris, am I correct in surmising?
Yes, I don't think there's any need particularly for a formal resolution to alter the logo. The name of the forum is set by the authorities, by ourselves and North East Lincolnshire. So really the logo is, I don't think there's a statutory requirement to have a logo. So
no, there
it probably doesn't require a formal resolution. So yeah, I would suggest, from an officer's point of view, that the one that is shown on the public document pack is appropriate. It does what it needs to, and is very similar to the previous ones in any case. John, are you happy with that to be able to be being used on the walks leaflets?
I'm happy. Yeah, that's fine. The only thing, as I say, then, could we actually extend the letters further round so it becomes not so that it's a complete circle, but so there's more room for bigger font of the letters and probably a smaller.
Chris, we can arrange. I can get my colleague Sue Hall to send it to John, and he can probably amend it accordingly.
Oh, thank you. If that's all right with both Chris's.
It's certainly fine by me. On the basis that I wouldn't have the first clue how to do it. So if Steve's got the appropriate wherewithal, then that's great.
Yeah. Chairman, before we progress, Sharon Hayes has, I don't know whether she wishes to comment, but she's asked to speak.
Sharon?
I have now just commented, but I've commented, pleased to see the logo has foot, cycling and horse riding connections. I didn't actually realise that when I first looked at it. It's only now you've pointed that out that I've looked at it in detail. So that was one of my comments. And the other comment would be, what help were you needing with this leaflet? Is it a technical thing or a delivery thing, printing thing, or what?
The main help that we need is to actually audit the routes. So you would be given training and you would have 2 colleagues with you to help. So it's measuring the distances, measuring the gradients and cross slopes so that we can, if you like, go from nothing in terms of one of the new routes to actually producing a route leaflet similar to that one that Steve circulated.
So is that 3 people then altogether that you need for each route? Or each
a maximum of 3, yes.
3, gosh. Okay. Right, thank you. That's interesting.
Okay. Okay, Chris. Think if there's no further questions, I'll take the camera off me.
Okay. Yeah, well, it doesn't make any difference to me. I can't see a thing.
You're one of the lucky ones.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Thank you for the work you do on this. So we're on to the last item now, which is the date and the time of the next meeting. I have down here that the chairman is to seek the views of members. I don't know. So who wants to say anything about that? When do you want to have the next meeting? If we're going to only have, I assume we're not talking about actually setting a date today, Steve, are we? We're just talking about.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, Chairman, what Chris Miller has previously said about the forward programme. I think it probably needs to be coordinated with Chris's comments on that. So maybe you could leave it with Chris Miller and appropriate officers, Chairman.
Okay, I'll just give people a chance to say anything on this if they have any particular views about the future meetings. About times and dates.
Chris Miller wishes to speak, Chairman.
Yeah. Go on, Chris.
Sorry, apologies, Chairman. I was just trying to mute myself. I was just wondering if there was any sense in having one close to the start of the municipal year. so starting off in April, sort of sometime, we can start afresh with obviously sort of the time frames that local authorities work within normally. By which stage we could have met with Matt and generated a forward programme that so we've got items to discuss at each potential meeting. We could perhaps set a couple of agendas, because there will be things coming through. So I need to talk to my transport colleagues about when they think they'll have something about walking and cycling strategies to put forward for presentation and things like that, so that they can be prepared as well. Does that seem appropriate?
Yes, it does to me. I don't know if anybody else thinks so, but at the moment, of course, well, apart with COVID, apart from anything else, we just don't know where we're going to be in terms of legislation and how much legislation is going to come forward and how much and when it will and so on. So, is everyone happy for that? Just to rest, as Chris just suggested.
Yeah, it seems as though members are happy, Chairman.
Yeah. Unless there's anything else, then I will be about to close the meeting. If anyone has anything reason for not doing, please speak up. Then I will declare the meeting closed. And thank you all very much for your time.
I just have one, Chairman, actually, that this will almost certainly be the last local access forum where my colleague, Mr. Blagg, will be in attendance.
Oh, yes. I understand you're retiring, Steve.
Yes, I'm coming back as a member of the forum, Chairman.
Oh, I've told you not to do that.
That sounds like coming back to haunt us.
Yeah, coming back as part of the cycling battalion. But no, yeah, it's been a pleasure to serve members, Chairman. It's been a very interesting. Certainly when we were up and running and visiting certain schemes, etc., especially on the East Coast, it was very good. But yeah, thank you very much indeed to members.
Well, Steve, I will say I think you have done an absolutely splendid job, and I have relied upon you to a very, very great extent. So thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Thank you very much.
Okay, so that's it. The meeting's closed.